Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Red Room. Tonight, we're kind of putting the cherry on top of our goal setting from the last 6 weeks. So we've been through looking at putting something in each of the 18 building blocks for a healthy lifestyle. And last week, if you remember, if you were here, someone asked the question, which was the perfect segue into what I wanted us to consider this evening, which is what happens when we set goals and we don't make it? What keeps us, and all of us have done this, we've set goals, we've decided what we really want in our lives, and then we go ahead and we start, or we don't start, or we get halfway there, or we fall back, or bad habits get in the way, any number of things. And so let's look tonight at all the ways that we sabotage ourselves and what to do instead. Because we are, after all, human, and if we're asking for something new, we want to really focus on a new goal. It means some kind of change. And there can be many things that keep us from changing internally and externally. And we want to be clear about that because we want to set ourselves up for a win. Okay. And thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Ask me a question anytime. Tell me how you sabotage yourself or how you fall short of your goals or are afraid to set your goals or set out on them. We've looked at all levels of what we want in our lives. Now let's look at how we sabotage them. Now there are things, of course, in our environment that we can't control. And it's up to us to problem solve what is possible to do about that. The things that get in our way, most of all, though, usually, I don't know about you, but it's certainly true for me and most of the people I know, it's something inside of me that's either overdeveloped or underdeveloped or unhealthy in some way, bad habit. And tonight I wanted us to just, not to be negative, but to expose those. And in essence, if we want to do something about our self-sabotage, the first thing we do is we learn it, we get to know it, and we make friends with it. It's just like when I'm talking with a couple, like I did tonight, about how they argue and have fights. So, first of all, say yes. In the beginning, say yes to everything. Not that you agree, but that you, yes, I understand, or yes, I know that this is important to you. Tell me about it. We want to know exactly how we get in our own way and how we sabotage ourselves for whatever goal we're setting. We make friends with that so that we know what to do about it. We get to know it really well instead of pushing it away. So there are various levels of that. And one of the things that, if you tuned in with me a couple of months ago, I talked about was this scale, and it's called the lifetime dilemmas. Now, these lifetime dilemmas are attached to developmental psychology. They're attached to the things that we all naturally need to learn inside, how to handle ourselves internally as well as in the world. And it's a natural capacity. And as human beings, we're anywhere along that dilemma. And sometimes we're nicely in the middle where it's really healthy, and sometimes we're over on one end or the other. Those dilemmas are ways that we sabotage ourselves if we haven't found a way to keep the dance in the middle. These are also attached to what we think of as the universal archetypes, or the roles that we need to develop during our childhood unfoldment. And when I teach that, I like to have a picture of it because it helps us remember it better. And this is how I think about it. It's my developmental integrative model. And so the one at the bottom is the first one, of course. And this has to do with our trust radius. The next one has to do with our belonging, our tribe, our social life, our relationships. Then how we think we are worthy, or our self-esteem, our sense of being confident and deserving. Then the one after that is how we are respectful with ourselves and with others with our boundaries. Next one is our self-discipline, our self-control, whether or not we use our power too loosely or too tightly. And then the last one is about our character and whether we're just a little too righteous or maybe we compromise our integrity too much. So those are the scales of the dilemmas, and I associate them with these 6 developmental archetypes. And the first one down at the bottom having to do with trust versus mistrust, and how we handle ourselves in that trust radius with other people. Maybe we're too trusting, maybe we don't trust enough. And if that's one of the ways you sabotage yourself, think about this. You've set a goal that involves you getting a job or working on a team with other people. And if you have an inadequate trust radius, that means you'll walk into some kind of a group task, and if you're a little too trusting, you will not check out the consequences, the accountability, the payment structure, the job descriptions, like I did once. Learned it the hard way and I'll never forget it. Or you might walk into that place where you're too suspicious and you don't trust people and you don't connect with them and are just a little too standoffish so that you don't enter and become a part of the team. So that can be one way where you might sabotage yourself in a project or in a job or in a problem-solving environment and not be able to reach the goal that you set for yourself. Then the next one is about sociability. Do you sabotage yourself in social situations or in situations where you need to be connecting with others in relationships, or at home, or your friendships? Are you sabotaging those? If you've set a goal to have a place on a team, maybe a basketball team, a soccer team, or a guild where you're banding together to create a quilt or fix somebody's house, whatever it is, where you need to work side by side with other people. And are you too clingy and too needy, where you are afraid that people aren't going to like you and you don't feel happy by yourself and you need too much out of the people around you? Or are you detached, separated, and not necessarily like the previous continuum? You're not suspicious, just you don't know how to connect with people and enjoy people and belong there. So that's another way you can sabotage yourself. And then the next area is about your sense of self-esteem, and the shadow side of that is the victim. Do you think of yourself as a victim? And then if you think of yourself as a victim, of course, you don't feel as if you're confident or you get what you need. And there are 2 forms of playing the victim. One is that you start bullying people and manipulating people to get what you need, or which means you're one of what I call the users and takers, or you're a pleaser and giver, where you give too much and do the things for other people that they should be doing for themselves, or end up being somebody's doormat and then whining or playing the martyr, in some sense the victim like that. Do you sabotage yourself and your goals with that kind of a self-concept or a way of relating to people? And then, of course, we sabotage ourselves with our emotional intelligence, where yes, we love people, but do we get needy or selfish? Or do we reject and get jealous and require people to be a certain way rather than being able to love them unconditionally and then push away the relationship that you want, maybe? And then the saboteur. The saboteur is where we don't have willpower. We don't have that sense of personal control over ourselves. And notice I put up there, willpower is muscle. Training makes it stronger. That means if we decide that we're going to do something and we decide to be more in control of our willpower, whether that means that we need to relax a little bit and be okay with things the way they are rather than trying to over-control, or do we need to hold ourselves tightly and keep bringing ourselves back to keep our will focused and not get too passive or passive-aggressive and just, well, that's okay. And just put that little or lot bit of effort forward so that we don't back down. We don't let it just cave in. Any questions? Any of you have the specific way to tell me how you sabotage your goals? Well, now that you've set a goal or a system of goals, what is it that you do that gets in the way of your success? All of us, of course, do that in one way or another. And then the last one, the betrayer. And in classic psychology, this used to be called the prostitute, where we would betray our honor or our integrity by selling ourselves cheaply or for something that's not valuable. And that way of betraying ourselves, again, it's the continuum of one of the lifetime dilemmas, where on one side we've got the righteous judge that's a little holier than thou and kind of puts people down that aren't quite as good as they think they should be. And then, of course, on the other end of the continuum, the person who lies a little bit, cheats, goes under the wire, sabotages their pure integrity by besmirching in some way what their word is or how they conduct themselves. Now, those are classic descriptions of how most of us have to come up against the human abilities to control ourselves and not sabotage ourselves. And of course, if we're gonna really learn these, we have to make friends with it, and we need to bring it down to size. And I like the term de-glamorize. Let's de-glamorize those parts of ourselves that end up sabotaging ourselves and keeping us from getting a win when we set our goals. And so I've got, where are my funny titles? And incidentally, Jack wrote this hilarious song, I Got a Saboteur. And it's in the style of the Beach Boys. It's irresistible. Let's see here. I'm finding the good names. Oh yeah, here it is. So the one that we were just talking about, the betrayer, this person who needs wisdom and honor and chooses not to behave themselves with wisdom and honor, I call that part of ourselves when we when we just cave in a little bit too much, or we get a little too angelic and saintly. I call this one the worrywart hamster wheel cheater. So that the person who betrays themselves, usually they're worrying, and their worrying goes like on a hamster wheel over and over and over again until they get themselves into a real swivet, and then they cheat themselves out of something or other because they're in such a swivet, they're kind of nervous and scared, and they're going to do anything they can to protect themselves. So that's the worrywart hamster wheel cheater. And if you have a worry hamster wheel cheater, first of all, what we want you to do is get off the hamster wheel. And that means you're going to need to think about how your anxiety works, how your fear works. And it really doesn't work for this kind of self-sabotage for you to stay on the hamster wheel and stay evaluating your fear. We want you to get off the hamster wheel, and we want you to get your mind focused on reality rather than your worries. And you and I know, do your worries help? Of course they don't. And your worries usually are based on something that could go wrong, but you're not going to do much constructive about it if you keep thinking about it going around and around and around. So we want you to get very intelligent and logical and reasonable about it. Might help to talk to one of those people where I think of, there are several people that I have in my life, and I call them the voice of reason, where I talk to them, they bring my feet back on the ground and remind me, now wait a minute, Heather, you don't need to do that, and this is not going to work that way. So, someone said, in general, what makes people self-sabotage? Well, in general, I would say immaturity and woundedness. And that the immaturity and the woundedness may be connected, and it may be from when you were a very small child, but usually it's along how you learn who you are and what life is that hasn't hung together, hasn't worked properly. And then usually there's an unhealthy or difficult emotion attached to it that's kind of like a flashing sign that reminds us we're not happy and we're in a tough spot. Does that make sense? I'll share with you a whole system of how I articulated all these different scripts. Here it is, of the different ways that we sabotage ourselves, and I categorize them under the 5 types of fears, because they're underneath whatever emotional response we have, or defense response we have, or something that pulls us back from what we want. It's some flavor of fear underneath that. So then we have the bulldog hell no blocker. So the saboteur who needs self-control is that bulldog that says, hell no, I'm going to block this. And that means that that bulldog blocker is going to block it either by being aggressive or by being passive aggressive. So we block ourselves and our success by being that bulldog hell no blocker, whether we do it just by not moving and quietly saying hell no, or whether we do it by being very aggressive and dominating and being in control with domination. Let's see, we got somebody said something. Is self-sabotage often unconscious or subconscious? If so, how can you recognize it when it happens? Good question. Yes, of course. Our self-sabotage is both conscious and unconscious. Sometimes think about when somebody wants something from us, and we don't want to give it. Very consciously, we will do whatever it takes to sabotage that and agree to something and then not do it. Or agree to something and then do it the way they don't want it done. Very consciously, in essence, being stubborn and contrary. Yeah, we can be very conscious about our sabotage. And sometimes we're conscious about our sabotage when we have something that's wounded us so badly, we have some self-hatred. And those terrible addiction patterns that we get into, those can be very conscious self-sabotage. People who smoke all the time, people who use substances and behaviors in an uncontrolled manner, they are consciously sabotaging. And then, of course, we have unconscious sabotage, where we get into habits or reactions or responses. Like, for example, I was working with a couple recently where they get into arguments, and one person says something, and then the other one says, yeah, but that's not right. Yeah, but that's a lie. Yeah, but that isn't the way it happened. They're unconsciously sabotaging that conversation by blocking it and by not really communicating and by having their own agenda and not really understanding that that form of communication, defensiveness, and fear is not going to do anything but keep them in an argument. And therefore they sabotage their communication and their relationship and don't really have the ability to self-observe and to see how and why they're doing that. And so this person said, if so, how can you recognize it when it happens? Isn't that the question? You know, we're all here to learn and grow and to master ourselves and to set our goals and reach our goals. And when we don't get the goal, or when we in some way or another aren't happy with something, something doesn't work, it gets our attention. Sometimes we know it, you know, sometimes people get into the habit of using a substance like alcohol or cigarettes, and it becomes a bad habit and an addiction, and they know that it's sabotaging themselves and their health and it's not good for them, but they say, I'm not going to stop, I like it. So they're very conscious of that. Do they recognize it? Yes, they recognize it very clearly. Do they want to do anything about it? No, not until it probably gets serious in some way or another. Let's see here. After I recognize it, I'm interested in what to do about it. Bravo. Exactly. What do we do about it? So the first thing that I'm suggesting is that we make friends with it. Get to know it very well. And when you get to know it very well, then you know which area of your development, of your psyche, of your personality, of your ego, of your lifestyle it involves. Then you want to look at tools that are going to help you with that lifestyle, that whatever it is that isn't working. And of course, if we had a nice recipe book for that, where we could just say, ooh, this is how I'm sabotaging myself. There it is on the list. Ah, I can do that, that, and that. Check. Wouldn't that be nice if we had a recipe book like that? I think we probably will in the next 100 years, but we don't quite have it now. And that's why people like me do our work. Whether I'm a counselor or a mentor or a healer, I help people figure that out. And I love doing it. But if we have better parents as time goes on, we will teach our kids ways where they're not quite so wounded, they won't sabotage themselves, and they'll handle themselves and all their abilities better. So we talked about the poor me, pity party, whine. No, we talked about the bulldog, hell nor blocker, didn't we? Then this person needs self-control. And there are different techniques for us learning self-control, and we'll talk about that. You should write that recipe book. Oh! Well, I think probably I've got a good start on it, actually. I'll remember that. You've written it down. I'll see if what I can cobble together over the next year, or sooner maybe. We'll just see, and I'll bring it to the Red Room. The next one we want to make friends with and really get to know so that he or she doesn't sabotage us is the needy, codependent caretaker-taker. So this is the person, the orphan, the person that needs emotional intelligence. And if we're needy, we're trying to take from somebody else or we're trying to give to somebody else. And if you catch yourself in that pattern, you want to pull out of it and be sensitive to what's appropriate. What's appropriate in terms of respecting yourself, your time, money, and space, and other people. Do not be seduced by other people who want to take your time, your money, your attention. You know, like for example, somebody that wants to talk with you on the phone for an hour every night and all they ever do is complain. And if you start a discussion on solutions, you get nothing but platitudes or excuses or whatever that they can't do that. That conversation is never going to go anywhere other than just the person venting. So at that point, are you in touch enough with doing that dance healthily where you no longer sabotage yourself and your time and the other person, and you no longer are the needy codependent caretaker taker? Okay. And then we've got the poor me pity party whiner. This is the victim, and this is the person who needs self-esteem. The poor me pity party whiner either whines to get somebody to wait on them, or whines when they are waiting on the other people too much, rather than stopping this poor me pity party and deciding either to do something or to withdraw. That can drive you a little around the bush, finding somebody that persists in being devoted to being a victim, and then telling you the whole story of all these different things through their childhood and through their job world and how they've been a victim to all this and why they can't be a success. And it's tiresome, it's boring, and it's unhealthy. And that poor me pity party whiner, you want to get away from them, and you definitely, if you catch yourself doing that, you want to get off that track. And I call that the asphalt. And then, of course, I've got the wild, woolly, rude dude coward. The coward, the person who is not willing to trust, or the person who trusts so much they are a coward because they don't draw the line for themselves. So we want to have proper courage so that we're not suspicious of everybody and we're not la 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 sweetness and light about everybody. So those are 5 funny characters that get us into deep and pervasive self-sabotage, and you probably know people who do that to themselves. Okay, here, Heather, here's my big question. Yay! If it is true that we are the creators of our own reality, then does it not follow that any event not to our liking is the result of self-sabotage? Isn't that a great question? Thank you so much for articulating that. Yes and no. At least that's my opinion. Sometimes the difficulties that are dealt to, I think are dealt to us, are our ordeals or our lessons that are put in our path, in our life, that we can't sidestep or ignore or avoid, that requires us to develop some part of ourselves that we don't have yet. Otherwise, it wouldn't be getting in our way. So, you know, think about when somebody, I'm thinking of a certain one that was a very dynamic example, a story that I heard years ago, where this man was a hard worker, a really good guy, very responsible. And it was involving heavy equipment. And he went out on the weekend to this heavy equipment site to make sure things were in order. And there was an accident where this huge piece of earth-moving equipment got caught on a log and it turned over and it broke both of his legs. And this man, who was a really good guy, reputable, great husband and dad, you know, there's no way he self-sabotaged. There's no way he was paying back for something he'd done wrong. It, in essence, was an ordeal. And it could have been, and it probably was, because of the nature of how horrific that accident was, because he spent a long time in the hospital and he ended up losing parts of his legs. But that was a tragedy and an ordeal which forced him into developing different parts of himself to adapt to living a life in a wheelchair or with crutches or something, and forced him alone into days and weeks of contemplation. And the person who told me the story talked about this man and how wonderful he was, that no matter who showed up to visit him in the hospital, he was always of good cheer. And that he awakened the admiration of many people by how he handled himself through that ordeal. Now, that is an example, one that comes to the top of my mind. When you ask, is it always that it's us sabotaging ourselves? No, I don't believe that it's that simple. That life is, after all, very complex, and there are great mysteries, deep, subtle, and big mysteries about being alive. And if we acknowledge that, it makes us and our lives bigger, more, in essence, more sacred. So let me see. She said, is it true that we are, he or she, that we are the creators of our own reality? Yes and no, because there is more to life than just us. That any event not to our liking is a result of self-sabotage. You know, in a certain way, people will argue that. And if we say that our lives, we are here to learn and grow, and that everything that appears in our lives is a response to what we need. And yet there are, you know, and I'm going to talk about the two things that are involved with what you just asked about, as I did one of them, which is that life brings us ordeals and tests us and brings us to our knees, which is one of the ways we develop humility. And it's not in direct response of that we created our own reality. It may be, but it's not anything we consciously or unconsciously created. So there is that. But then there's also this other view where we think of having been set up before or at the beginning of our life that we wanted to learn certain lessons, and that maybe there's a plan or a journey for certain things to come into our lives as ordeals or as tests or as lessons, and that maybe we had a part in planning that, or maybe we didn't. So I don't know how we could know the absolute answer to that question, but I do know that whatever it is that is a block or a sabotage between us and where we want to go, or the desires of our heart and soul, it will require more of us to figure it out and to get past it. Whether or not we are the creators of that, I don't know. And I think it's probably quite a complex answer to that question that's going to be accurately answered question by question, that there's not a great simple rule of thumb, because life and people and their journeys are so complex. What do you think about my answer? I'm wondering. So let me share with you, I spent considerable thought and research, probably for about 2 years, on considering wanting to get my arms around the saboteur, or how we get in our way, blockages between us and what we want or who we can be. And so I've got a chart here, signs of the 5 fears, 5 flavors of fear. And then I have the coping mechanisms or the habits of fear, which is quite detailed and complex. And when I do this seminar about the saboteur, we personalize this. You personalize it for yourself because you do some of these things and others, it's not anything that bothers you or gets in your way. So, I have mentioned this book before, and I'll remind you of it again. It's John Gray's book, How to Get What You Want and Want What You Have. And you may have seen the public television special that he recorded built around this book. But this book is one of those that's really and truly, you were asking me to create that recipe book. Well, John Gray has created a recipe book here. It's superb. I can't tell you how approachable and how delightful it is. He talks about the 12 emotional blocks and then how to remove those emotional blocks in a very detailed and step-by-step writing process. It's superb. It's true. It works. So if your block is an emotional block, and usually if we are sabotaging ourselves or we are blocked in some way, there is an emotion attached to it because we care. And if we care about something, we're going to have an emotional response to it. So I've taken his emotional responses and I've categorized them in the 5, what I call the 5 flavors of fear. So we've got the survivor, and this is about trust, mistrust, and the emotional block is anxiety and resentment. The general feeling is uncertainty, being deprived, and then the healing emotions to explore and release this emotional block would be, for the anxiety and uncertainty, would be fear, sorrow, frustration, and disappointment. So there's an example of how you would work through that block. I'll just read you these emotional blocks and see if one or more of these are the ones that you know are up for you, or maybe used to be or might still be. Of course, anxiety, worry, fear, resentment, depression, confusion, self-pity, procrastination, guilt, perfectionism, blame, judgment, indifference, and indecision. So these are about emotional blockages. Anyone want me to go more deeply into any one of those? If you've got one of these and you're ready to do the work, ready to plow on through it sincerely and deeply, then get John Gray's book, and the subtitle is A Practical and Spiritual Guide to Personal Success. It's been around for quite a while, and I haven't found one that's more approachable, more practical, so that you can, by yourself, do the work or with a friend. Okay. So I've got these habits of fear, coping mechanisms, and just see which of these fear-based coping mechanisms you might have that you want to work on. And then once we know exactly, then we know what to do. It's pretty self-evident what to do. There are, I've listed here the 5. So of course the survivor, who lacks trust and contentment. This person will be isolated. Interpersonal connections are emotionally cold, distanced, or indifferent, or boundaries are too tight to avoid emotional connection, causing an undeveloped ability for intimacy. That's 1, isolation. Number 2, selfish. Feeling self-pity or sorry for the self and looking for needs to be met without empathy or consideration for others and or their needs too. Be a bully or a tyrant by being a user or taker. Number 3, be a problem to people. Manipulate or try to control people with domination and or making others feel guilty to get their needs met or for your own needs. And then number 4, the survivor, the fear-based coping mechanism would be anxiety. Very intelligent, but have strong fears about having enough resources, money, or security, which then preclude them being true to their dreams and desires because they're so worried about money. That one's a pretty common one. You probably know somebody that has it, and it's tough. But it is irrational, an irrational fear. So let's see, we've got enough time to touch on these. Then the second form of self-sabotage is the orphan, and this irrational fear, this person lacks emotional intelligence and the ability to be intimate. And there are, again, 4 ways this person is needy. They're charming, too charming, and they use their ability to be charming. They're unemotional or disconnected from their feelings. They're blaming, where they think their lack of success is due to the misunderstanding, jealousy, incompetence of others. So that's about the orphan, who needs more emotional intelligence and who needs the ability to be appropriately intimate. Then the victim, this person lacks self-esteem or an identity of worthiness. And the coping mechanisms that are fear-based when we find ourselves in that victim role, ignorant, just don't have the models or traditions that they need, the undeveloped lack of information about their abilities. They're self-doubting. They hold high standards. They feel they can never possibly meet. And they tend to mercilessly emphasize their own faults and failings to such an extent that they do not appreciate what they do accomplish, and then they sabotage themselves like that. Number 3, they feel unworthy in an unhealthy way, and they focus on minimizing their risks, avoiding situations in which they might possibly fail, etc. They think of themselves as undeserving, so they're invested in having just enough to get by, whatever that is: time, attention, money, friends. They live hand to mouth because they judge themselves as undeserving. So that's the victim and how the victim sabotages him or herself. Then the betrayer, the fear-based coping mechanisms that the betrayer has, they're perfectionistic, highly talented people for whom success comes easily or not at all. If they can't be other than the best, they have no interest in participating. They're righteous. They hold themselves back by indignation and resistance to new ideas, that stubborn place of being saintly. They are cheating. They try to get away with things by avoiding accountability, morality, and trustworthiness. They may feel trapped, hopelessly immobilized by contradictory ambitions. They feel they cannot extricate themselves from their mutually neutralizing ambitions and wishes. So on one hand, perhaps they want to have a really good job and a really good income so that they can afford to buy a nice home for their family. And on the other hand, they feel that money is filthy and that only certain kinds of people that they don't like really set goals to earn a lot of money because they think it's that horrible corporate thing that some people think is so greedy. So then they've got contradictory goals there and keep themselves in that fear-based coping mechanism of not going anywhere with it. And revengeful. The betrayer that lacks spiritual or moral intelligence, they can spread liar gossip about others, planning and enacting damage to another person, and they can sabotage themselves and other people, of course, with this hurt or injustice. And then, of course, the saboteur, purely saboteur, who lacks ability for self-direction and success. and their coping mechanisms, the kind of fear-based coping mechanisms they have. I've got 6 of them. Procrastinating, postponing major decisions and commitments. They evade permanence, engagement, and seriousness. They keep trying possibilities, but they don't engage fully. They stop short. They work hard up to a point, but stubbornly keep their efforts just below success. They're rebelling. They get aggressively striking out against the world or authority, which undermines themselves. That I'll get them before they get me attitude. They refuse to comply with demands in a certain way or with authority figures instead of seeing them as opportunities to explore their strengths against a standard. They risk too much. They're energetic and impulsive. They take unnecessary risks that minimize success and often ensure their own defeat. They're too indulgent, maybe passive, lack of initiative, and they're disengaged with others and with life. They may be just comfort-seeking, and so they'll set goals, but if their comfort is more important, they sabotage the goals. They may be entitled, self-medicating, addicted, or self-indulgent. They may refuse to participate. And then the last one, punishing. Stiffly self-discipline themselves, obedient to an internalized critical parent they carry around who whips them to succeed and has harsh judgment on themselves to the detriment of their life balance and their happiness. So there you go. Those are the 5 general categories of false fears and the coping mechanisms they use to sabotage themselves. Is this helpful? Is this speaking to you? Do you have any questions about any of these? We want to know exactly how we self-sabotage, and there you go. I think I've talked about a whole sphere, a world of those. Not saying that there probably aren't others that I haven't articulated as well. We human beings, after all, are very, very creative and inventive. And we can sabotage ourselves from success in a lot of different ways. There are a couple of things that I wanted to share with you that are kind of cool. One of the ways to stop sabotage is with Grandma's rule. And do you remember Grandma's rule or Mom's rule, which says you will have your dessert if you first eat your spinach. You can get the reward at the end of the project if you complete your involvement in the project and succeed at doing that. So this can appear in our lives in many, many different ways. We can put it there ourselves. We can get it set up for ourselves, or we can say, here's a competition, and I want to, I feel the connection with the competitive energy, and I'm going to do it. It could be even training to run a marathon of some sort, so that you motivate yourself to stop the self-sabotage by having the reward here after you've done what you need to do in order to not self-sabotage yourself. And we can use that in hundreds of different ways, how we can set ourselves up with that reward at the end. Now, if you're an adult, it can't be just a namby-pamby award. We don't want it to be a cake. Food is not a good reward. Alcohol is not a good reward, although it takes the edge off sometimes. We want it to be an adult reward. So, for example, if you work for a big company and there's a big project that's going to make the company 6 figures or 7 figures, and the reward is a trip to the Bahamas. Now, that's a grown-up reward. And you can set that up for yourself, too. It may not be that you can afford it this year, but that you agree with yourself that you're going to do all of these things, and then at the end of your degree program, or at the end of a certain time of saving, where you get your kids into college, or you've finished a certain project with your parents, whatever it is. If it's your anniversary, there is something that you set up that's an adult reward or benefit that really, really makes you feel excited, really inside. It gets you, it's like, oh my God, I can do this. Let's see, we've got a comment. I'm reading over here. So does each method of self-sabotage require a unique solution? Probably. It seems that there are so many ways to commit sabotage that it would be valuable to find a solution which would be effective in more than one case of sabotage. Yes, and those are the golden ones, you know. First of all, you need to know what your favorite ways or your typical ways of sabotage are, and then build something around that. Now, you know, punishment doesn't usually work very well. Positive outcomes are the ones that help us. Now, there's another positive one here, and then there's one that's maybe kind of holding your feet to the fire. So the one that's holding the feet to your fire is called cue exposure therapy, so to speak, where there's a cue that cues you into doing something where you sabotage yourself. Where, and I'll use a simple one. I know that smokers, sometimes when they have a beer, they want a cigarette. Or if they are having dessert, they want a cigarette. So they know that their cue for smoking is dessert. So what you want to do, what you want to set yourself up for, if you really want to do this, is you decide that you're going to have dessert and you're not going to smoke. You decide, and you make it happen. And so you set yourself up many times in a row. All right, I'm having dessert today, and I'm not smoking, and you do it. And this is really and truly pure behavior therapy. And then the next day, you decide, I'm having dessert and I'm not smoking. You decide that you prescribe for yourself the cue, knowing that you're putting the cue in place and you're not going to take the cue. And you can do that with fun, you can do that with a little sarcasm, you can do that with determination. And you decide to train yourself, to put yourself in that situation and have a different response. When you're in charge like that, you've set it up for yourself. It's similar to one of the things that I do with people when they're letting go of something difficult. And like you have to forgive somebody for some wound, some detriment that they visited upon you. And you need to let it go, you need to forgive them, and then release. One of the things that I ask people to do when we've talked that through and done the emotional release work and they have forgiven the person and let them go, I suggest that at that point they also place a blessing on that person. Now, placing a blessing is a kind of a magical thing. Because if you place a blessing, it means you have something to give. It means it's from the heart and you care. And love trumps everything. I don't care what it is. Love and forgiveness are going to trump it. So if you're able to place a blessing, it says you've raised yourself above it. It's no longer getting in your way, internally or externally, and you've given some care to it, which means you've blessed it with something higher. That's kind of a magical thing to do. You then place yourself above it, just like with this cue exposure. You decide to expose yourself to this, which means you're in control, you are the authority. and you decide what you're going to do, rather than just following the old habit and the old pattern, the old craving. So that's an interesting one for your consideration. Okay. Grandma's rule is risky. If I wait until I eat all my dinner before eating dessert, I will never have dessert. This is because, in real life, there is no end to the list of things which should and or must be done. Well, that's true. Absolutely, that's true. And that's one of the reasons why I'm saying put yourself in charge. You don't have to eat your whole dinner, just your spinach. And all the things that you need to do, you decide. You decide how much you want to get done in one day and then reward yourself every day. And that you know that that's one of the greatest motivators in the whole world, that we decide at the beginning what fun we want, what reward we want, what play we want. Because if we don't set up the play first, it's not worth all the work that we do. So you decide how much you want to get done for the reward. Don't let it run you. Don't let that old work ethic, which is just pure logic and has no creativity to it, don't let that run you. You decide it. Okay, Heather, great. I love that. Just your spinach. Thanks for asking a question. Okay, now there's another one here. When you set your goals, sometimes I know there are those people who get too involved helping other people, or the company's goals, or feeling responsible, like I have to eat everything before I get my reward, or just get tired, or just get into the old habits or the patterns, whatever it is, and we back down off our goals, and then we revisit them. Sometimes we've done them anyway, of course. But if you want to be conscious and not sabotage yourself, you want to keep that goal here because it's precious, because it's yours, because it's the thing that you really want. So there's no replacement for having that goal somewhere where you can see it. Whether, you know, that's just you placing a sticky note. But I know if I put a sticky note on my computer, I'll notice it maybe 3 times and then my eyes don't see it anymore. You want something that's visually stimulating or beautiful or unique, something that you keep bringing into your environment, or a habit with your journaling, or a habit with your marriage meeting or your family meeting where you revisit your goals. It's, you know, having kids around is such a motivator. You want to show them and teach them the best. So if you have a family meeting every week, you bring those beautiful goals that each one of you have set, and you kind of revisit them. Just keeping them, bring them into your mind, bring them into your sensitivity and your awareness. Put it on your screensaver. Stick a little card in your wallet. I've coached people to get a big dry or a little dry erase board. I've got one right here. I kind of like it because it's little and I can change it anytime I want to. Of course, I've got a big one at my office. Get yourself a dry erase board, or get yourself, I love having my own flip charts. It's not just for my work, I have them at home for me. Yeah, I use my flip chart. I have to at work. But I also, I don't know if you can see out there in the hallway on the wall back there, I've got those, you know, Post-it note flip chart pad pages. I put those up there to keep it in my visual field. Let's see. I choose no spinach. Let's start this no spinach club. Right, dry erase boards are fabulous, yes. And a way for you to keep reminding yourself, to keep it in front of you. So keep reminding yourself of the goodies. And I know many of you have heard me talk about my goal setting, because I'm a very visual person, and many of us are, with a goal setting poster. And then also this one that I did, and I mentioned, it's a whole book of my goals. If you can just see. It's full of all kinds of things. It took me I don't know, quite a while to create that. But it was me setting my goals in beautiful color in ways that were so fondly held. It's some of it's too intimate to show people because it's so close to my heart and so vulnerable, what I did in that book. But that was one of the ways that I created my goals for myself. And of course, I've got my big goal posters. And even though it's kind of vulnerable, it's kind of nice to show that to people, to say, this is from my heart and soul. Let's see here. Dry erase boards are, yes, they are. Erase boards are like life. You can always erase what you don't like and start over again. Exactly. Or what you've done. Or rewrite it. And it's like, oh, now I know this is what I really, no, I don't want to go to Venice. I really want to go to Milan. In my case, Grandma's rule applies first and foremost to my young children. And of course, that part is all joy, isn't it? Reaching our goals, you know, sometimes we tend to get so serious about things. And like that rude dude coward, to put funny names on things so that it comes from our sense of philosophy about ourselves. Yeah, we make mistakes. Yeah, we sabotage ourselves. But it's not the end of the world, you know, unless you're really deeply wounded and you need to get therapy. One of the other things that I wanted to mention before we end tonight, and this, I don't know about you, but this evening has gone very quickly for me. There's so much to say about self-sabotage. But that getting a mentor, or having a friend, or an elder where they have the latitude, you know, having the latitude where they want to hear your goals, or where they want to help you stay on track. It could be a coach or a mentor, a supervisor, to have them help you expand your vision, to articulate it even bigger than you imagined it to be. A real mentor, or your spouse, or your best friend, or you for your children. You'll help develop a vision together that you hold yourself to it, and they will see great things in your future for you as well. So, I've got a note here. The next time you're invited to a goal setting or strategic planning meeting, keep a meeting log and think about what's it going to be like? How is it going to turn out? So that you keep, you know, the goal in mind. You connect with the thing that fires you up. That instantly takes you past some of those low-grade, immature, self-sabotaging things that we do. Because when we raise our eyes, our sense of desire to the highest level, it trumps everything else. Like when you want something great for one of your children. If it's just for you, you kind of piddle around. But if it's for one of your children, or if it's for your best friend, somehow or another we connect with that energy that's above the self-sabotage level, the old habits or the whiny things or the little wounds, and we go anyway. Let's see here. But nevertheless, I experience a severe lack of time to get through the other life demands. Sometimes there simply is not time for my personal strategic planning. That's an excuse, my dear. And that is the essence of my self-sabotage. Great evening, Heather. Thanks for your wisdom and the special sharing from your heart. Thank you so much for being with me tonight with the broadcast and in the Red Room. I love this, and it's inspiring to have you here with me and to know that this in some way is helping you create a better life for yourself, inside and out. Ditto. Okay, now, I just told you that that's an excuse. You don't have the time? The time is always there. Pardon me. Remember, if you were passionately in love, you would find a way to have a tryst. If you're passionately in love with what you really want, you'll find a way to get up 15 minutes or a half hour earlier, maybe just one morning a week. Go to a restaurant you love that opens like in a hotel early in the morning and have yourself the treat of just 20 minutes with a special coffee and a notepad. You can do this, dear. A tryst, yes. Spinach, no. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the Red Room tonight. Best wishes, and I will see you next week. I'm giving you a warning. I am getting dessert. I'm going to take off the last 2 weeks in January, so I won't be here for 2 weeks after next week. So next Wednesday, tune in, and we'll talk in the Red Room, and then I'm taking a 2-week sabbatical, and I'll tell you all about it when I get back. So good night, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Bless you, and I'll see you next week in the Red Room. Good night.